municipal finance specialists to help prepare your budget and implement it. And we have plenty of folks to assist with assessment, billing, and collections. We have a great accounting staff. We would also expect to help you with any stakeholder outreach and public information activities that you may need. We're happy to spearhead that. We have some great communications folks on our team that can help us provide materials. And also, we are here to be the primary contact for the parties to the judgment. So we recognize that that's an important role here, and we want to make sure that we are here to answer their questions, assist them, and make sure that all of the Watermaster rules and regulations are implemented without any issues. And so here I just want to introduce you a little to our proposed team. And I'm the leader of that team, and my experience is basically in water. I've spent 22 years with the Main St. Gabriel Basin Watermaster, most of that time as the executive officer. So this type of role is very, very familiar to me. But I also, excuse me, I have nearly 10 years of operations management experience with utilities. So I have some technical background as well in terms of water system management. And currently working with groundwater sustainability agencies and another water district as well. April Kegwin is our clerk of the board, but she's more than that as well. She's a great administrative assistant, and she's very experienced in groundwater sustainability matters and production accounting. She handles lots of the details with regard to production reporting, assessment, billing, and she's a great addition to the team. In fact, you may, if you were here 2 years ago when we talked to you, she came in my place because I had COVID at the time, and April came in kind of at the last minute. And I think those of you who met her agreed that she's very sharp and lots of energy. And then Gina Shukard is our finance manager. Gina has over 30 years of experience in local government finance, municipal finance. I've been working with Gina for the past, 2.5 years, and she is amazing. So she can prepare budgets like no one I've ever seen, and she's a wonderful addition to our team as well. And then again, we also have an accounting team to back us up within RGS. Excuse me. Yep, we can move on. And we wanted to let you know some of the other agencies that RGS staffs and provides administrative support to. Salinas Valley Basin, and Sophia, you may want to add to this because it's not one that I'm involved with, but one of our first water agencies where we fully staff the Salinas Valley Basin. And it's a complex basin with 6 sub-basins and a very, very active board. Where we provide all of the staffing. Sophia, do you want to add anything to the Salinas Valley Basin?
Yeah, thank you, Carol. We are really proud of our work there. We joined them in 2017. We have been their comprehensive staff pretty much since then, and we're able to successfully get a groundwater sustainability plan approved very early in the process. Get the communities that are involved in the Salinas Valley Basin to put together a revenue structure that would sustain the basin and also obtain a lot of DWR grants for that basin. So we really feel like we've accomplished a lot for them. We're continuing to work with them and anticipate that to be an ongoing relationship and an ongoing success story.
Thank you. So we also provide services to the Colusa Groundwater Authority north of Sacramento, northern Sacramento Valley. And we're working with them to get an approved groundwater sustainability plan. They co-manage the Colusa subbasin along with the Glen Groundwater Authority. So 2 counties basically managing 1 subbasin. And just recently, we started providing some support to the Las Posas Valley Watermaster, brand new, just getting their activities started, their Watermaster work going, and they needed some assistance with their extraction and use reporting. And so they hired RGS to assist with that. And, initially we were thinking about just because it's electronic reporting. That's part of what their judgment requires is electronic production reporting. And so we were thinking initially that it might be just a fillable form that you would email out. And actually, I think it was Sophia that came up with the idea that we might actually use a survey tool. And so we developed a survey type reporting form and a link that we send out to all of the parties. And we're actually in the process of collecting all of those now. It's the first reporting event, but it seems to be going very well. We prepared a tutorial for their website, and we've had a few of the producers call and ask questions, but for the most part, it seems to be working very well. And we're excited about being able to help them get that off the ground. And then finally, we also provide administrative services to Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority over here in Ridgecrest. And we've been working with them for about 3.5 to almost 4 years, providing administrative services. We work with their engineer, we work with attorneys, and we were one of the first approved groundwater sustainability plans for the critically overdrafted basins for Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. So we were very pleased to be able to get that passed through DWR. Obviously not an easy process when you're working on Sigma matters, and especially with critically overdraft basins, but we continue to work with them, and I think we're doing some good work there. So finally, we just want to say that we think we're a good fit for what you're looking for. As Sophia noted, we have a lot of different folks available to assist us. So our capacity is very flexible. We can bring folks in or cut them back depending on what your needs are. We have the administrative expertise to help you with your compliance matters, making sure that your rules or regulations are followed, that your judgment requirements are met. And we're water wise pros. We have some great water experience on our team, and we would love to bring that to you. And I think ultimately RGS provides a very cost-effective staffing solution. When you would like to have the benefits of a full staff, but you don't necessarily need all of those people full time. I think RGS provides a very attractive solution that allows you to take advantage of those seasoned professionals without having to have them on staff full time, paying full time salaries, but you have the benefit of their expertise. Sophia, anything you'd like to add there?
I think that sums it up, Carol. We really appreciate the opportunity to present ourselves to you and look forward to answering your questions.
Great, thank you very much. Great presentation. And I get to ask you the first question, ladies. So take a few minutes to provide a high-level explanation of the judgment physical solution approved in the Antelope Valley adjudication.
Well, I will take that. I find that I've worked with several judgments, excuse me, throughout Southern California. I told you that I worked for San Gabriel Basin, Watermaster. I sat on the Raymond Basin Management Board for a while. I'm very familiar with a number of the other adjudicated basins, and we tend to see the very similar components in the groundwater adjudications. Generally, water rights are assigned based on historic use. And there's generally a need because of overdraft and a need to be able to provide replenishment. So the physical solution identifies a way to keep the basin in balance, make it sustainable. So the physical solution generally is, and I believe that's the case here, you've identified a safe yield, and then every year there's a replacement water replenishment requirement that's determined, and it's provided through the use of imported water, and that is paid for through assessments on the users, generally those who are producing in excess of their adjudicated right.
Great, thank you very much. Have you read our physical solution?
I've read it in the past.
Great, thank you.
All right. Please explain your understanding of the administration's role within the AV Watermaster, please.
I believe that is to be your staff. I think you have your technical component, and that's your Watermaster engineer, and you have your legal component, and that's your attorney. And then your administrative component is your administrator or your staff. And the role there is to basically develop your board agendas, ensure that that everything in the rules and regulations are complied with, assure that the requirements of the judgment are met. But to be your staff, I think there's a pretty long list of things that go with that, but starting with preparing your board agendas, staffing your board meetings, taking care of the business arising from the board meetings, going through your judgment and the rules and regulations. There's going to be a list of things that need to be done on a regular basis. Those might be monthly, those might be quarterly, they might be annually, but that would be to work with the engineer and the attorney to ensure that that all of those needs are met, to make sure that the assessment billings are done, that the money's collected, that your replenishment water is purchased or handled correctly. Basically, it's providing all of your administrative support. That would include your financial aspects as well, your budget, and tracking, making sure that everything is, that the bills are paid, that your budget is on track, making sure that you have those financials for you every month. Again, it's a pretty long list when you look at the comprehensive services, but basically it just means that if you were to hire a general manager or an executive officer and a staff to go with it, that is.
Next question, please.
Thank you. So, having an administrator with the local presence that understands the needs of the Antelope Valley is a high priority for the parties of the adjudication. So can you please explain how you would maintain a local presence and stay engaged with the needs of the community?
That's a terrific question. For the most part, we work remotely through RGS, and I think I'll also look to Sophia to add to this as well. But I think, first of all, I live only about an hour away. I live in Oak Hills near Hesperia. April, our clerk, she lives in Ridgecrest, so she's also not too far away. It's not unreasonable for us to be here as needed for meetings or for office hours. If there is no office, I think you have office space here, but if you don't, we can arrange for an office location. I think we're close enough to this community to where it's easy for us to be here for events. Certainly, there's also a lot to be said for the technology that has come with Zoom meetings and basically electronic communications, and we're very big on doing a lot of that as well. But what can you add to that, Sophia?
Well, I think that we are really flexible. You know, we want to meet your needs, and there are certainly real reasons why someone needs to show up in person to meetings, to community events, to walk project sites. And I know Carol regularly does that for the agencies that she works with. I know that other members of our team regularly do that for the agencies they support. So we intend to be present in those sort of essential areas. We do find that the larger support team is throughout California, and it is both valuable to you to have that expertise and cost effective, not to necessarily import it in person. But again, very case by case. If you have a desire for a public face in your community on an ongoing basis, I've been spending a lot of time with workforce development issues in California recently. And I do think that we also represent potentially a good job opportunity for someone in the community if that is something that meets the needs that you have. And we have hired local staff for some of our more remote rural agencies that we staff because it is important to them to have someone people can talk to on an ad hoc basis, someone who can go to the bank or to the post office if that's what's needed to handle some details of business in person or in paper. And life still does happen in paper, much as, you know, we all are moving in an electronic direction. So we're really open to meeting the needs of your agency in that regard and to adding value to the employment situation in your community if that's appropriate.
Thank you.
This is Director Clancy. I'm going to go next. Maintaining the trust built among the parties on all sides of the adjudication is very important. How will you contribute to sustaining and building upon that trust?
I think dealing with everyone fairly, honestly, and with integrity is the first place to start. And I've had the benefit of working with a variety of different types of water producers, whether they are, you know, urban water suppliers or ag users or municipal, industrial producers, commercial, small mutual water companies, or even just individual pumpers. They all have different levels of needs, and it's our job to make sure that those needs are met. So whether they are a big municipal urban supplier and they have a sophisticated system, or whether they're just a small well owner that needs some assistance with some of the technical issues, I think we have the capacity to be able to provide whatever assistance they need. And so I think that's where we work on building their trust, is by being there to provide whatever assistance they need at whatever level that is.
If I might just add to, we have within RGS a team called Transparent Government, and we have a communications and engagement team, and we have a team of skilled facilitators for addressing and resolving specific issues and needs. So we believe very much in transparency. We think that's foundational to trust. We believe very much in communication and bringing people in, not waiting for them to have issues, but making sure that they are informed, educated, engaged, and preventing any issues from arising. And if issues do need to be resolved, we have a very tried and true collaborative problem-solving approach with our facilitators that we think allows people to work through their different needs and interests and come to solutions that are agreeable or at least not objectionable.
Very good. Thank you. Derek?
All right. Thank you. A successful transition from ABEC staff to the new administration staff is critically important. Please explain your desired approach to making that transition.
I think ideally we would want to sit down with the current staff, assuming they're available. I believe you're doing it generally in-house at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we would love to just have a meeting, be able to sit down, go through things, and then we would dive in. And this is what we've done in other areas as well. We just start working on things, and we ask questions, and we make sure we're getting it right. And we would probably work the transition over a period of maybe 2 to 3 months at most, I think, to a full transition. There's certainly a lot of questions we would have in terms of document maintenance and, how we would share information, files, maintenance, that sort of thing. But the best way to start is just to sit down with the current staff and talk about the best way to start transitioning the work. And again, then we simply, because we know what to do. We know what needs to be done in general. And a lot of it is just filling in the detail and making sure we have access to the records that are needed. So that would be my approach to transition. Sophia?
I think that's sort of a fundamental approach. Obviously, we want to understand from current staff what they're doing and how they're doing it. One of the challenges with transitions that we found is that sometimes the ownership of the tools to do the work does not belong to the agency that needs to have that work done. And so we have to find ways to either agree to keep using those tools or add new tools to the mix. RGS does bring a lot of tools to the equation if a transition is needed, but that does also mean that we spend some time actually uploading and downloading data. We try very hard to avoid rekeying any kind of data, and setting up with the board the new approaches and protocols to the workflow. The other challenge with transitions is that sometimes work is cyclical and it doesn't happen every week or every month or even every year. And so we do want to retain some relationship with the people who previously performed the work so that when cyclical issues arise, we can check in with the folks who've handled it before and make sure we have a proper understanding of that particular issue. So I would anticipate we want to not just have a transition period, but have a collegial relationship that we all agree that we can talk for the next 12 months after the transition's done, just in case. So those are kind of the parameters that we look at when we're doing a transition, and every agency has some unique needs, and as those arise, we problem solve them. If we need to bring something to the board because it's going to involve, more expenditure than simply us taking over the work and a conversation with the people who previously did it, we will certainly let you know. But I'm anticipating that even the tools that you might need that we can deploy are not going to be extraordinarily expensive.
Very good. Thank you. And now we have follow-up questions. Any follow-up questions from the board? Go ahead, Brandon.
This is Director Clandry. Could you explain the makeup of your JPA to me a little clearer? Who is the chair of your JPA board and who consists of that board?
I'll defer to Sophia for that.
So our board is made up of public agencies. We have Town of Yountville, City of Napa, City of Walnut Creek, City of Dublin, City of Soledad, City of Larkspur, and the Citrus Heights Water District from the Sacramento area on our board. The representatives from those agencies are the chief executives of the agency, not electeds from their councils. So our board is made up of their chief execs. Our current chair is Hillary Strauss, the general manager of the Citrus Heights Water District. So he and I work closely together to think about the future of RGS and the services that we're offering and make sure that we are staying in touch with and meeting the needs of California agencies.
Okay, and then listening to you guys, I was marking it down. I heard the term remote 5 times. Mm-hmm. Are you guys anticipating serving as our administrator remotely, or are you anticipating being in person?
So RGS has been a virtual organization since its inception. We think it's cost effective not to have brick and mortar. Having said that, when we talk about administering, there are in-person events that administrators go to, such as board meetings, such as key stakeholder gatherings in the community. And we do attend those in person, wherever in person happens to be with our clients. We do a lot of work remotely. You don't necessarily need someone sitting in an office that you're paying for producing accounting reports. That is something that can happen from a lot of places at a price point that's more manageable than the overhead of a staff office. So we will anticipate part of our team working remotely at all times, and that would be sort of the larger support group that you might need only very occasionally. We would anticipate the assigned primary core team for you working remotely during the week with preparing reports and documents and making phone calls to your engineer or attorney, gathering information to prepare staff reports for your consideration. We would certainly be prepared to and willing to and happy to have our clerk and our chief exec for you and our finance director come to your board meetings and engage with you in person if that's your desire.
Well, Sophia, the reason I asked that is 2 meetings ago, we had a grandmother in her late 70s, early 80s that came in here and was a widow and frustrated beyond belief. She couldn't figure out how to do her reports. And I will speak for myself clearly. I will never reach out to somebody and tell them they have to learn how to do stuff remotely. I feel very strongly that we have to have staff on hand or a representative at some point to be able to help those that may not have the aptitude or the ability to work remotely in certain situations to solve problems that may arise.
I completely agree with you. Customer service that won't help people where they need to be helped is not customer service. And I sympathize entirely with our older population. My mother is 93 and she struggles with technology too. So, I help her. Now, in that same way, I want our team to be helpful to everyone who's a customer, whether it's a language barrier or a technology barrier. We need to get that barrier out of the way and help the customer. And we will figure out how to do that. There are a range of different ways because there are a range of different needs. But our commitment is we will help your customers get things done timely, happily, in a way that makes sense to everyone involved.
And while I can't make an argument for staffing full-time, I definitely do see a value in having staff available before and after board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carolina.
Thank you for the presentation again, Carolina Hernandez. I heard 2 things that I actually was hoping you could share more about. One was in your presentation, you mentioned communications and your experience with being able to put together communications projects and, to further reach out to community. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and your internal transparent government. Thanks.
Okay. Our communications team has been working with Desert Water Agency, with Citrus Heights Water District, with, let me see if I can get this name right, Santa Ynez River something 1. I apologize. It's like a eight component name for that particular water district. We are working on website issues. I believe, Carol, for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority, we have some work that we've done with an economic development district and a healthcare district. We are engaged, of course, with a range of internal communication projects as well. So we do not only the graphics and writing for outreach materials, but we do social media, we do website management, and we do community engagement meetings or surveys, and go boots on the ground if we need to be meeting the community where they are at their community centers or schools or local veteran centers. So it is a really broad range of services, and our goal is not to be a graphics design team or a production house, but to truly focus on what kinds of communications add value to everyone's understanding of what the agency's work in the community is and what kinds of engagement activities bring people together to make good decisions about the work of the agency in the community. So that's our sort of strategic overview on that. Transparent government brings together a number of issues. Our focus is that the work of public agencies should be visible and participatable to the community. So we do traditional clerking activities in terms of agenda development and meeting management. We also do governance training and development activities for new members of governance bodies in terms of what are the rules of the road when you're a member of a public board. What are the local preferences about how to engage with board activities? We do trainings for folks on what kinds of communications by board members are Brown Act subject and what kinds are not. We are not attorneys, and we're happy to work with your legal group, but we find that legal guidance and the reality of how we talk to each other, especially in small communities, don't always intersect well. And we want to have a little bit more of a understanding of the dialogue and how it happens in your community, and make sure that you are able to communicate effectively and in a compliant manner. We do a lot of records management work in transparent government and a lot of Public Records Act request compliance support in terms of making sure that people who are asking for information get the information that they're asking for, and that agencies are storing information in a way that's appropriate both to their administrative needs and to the needs of the community. So that's our transparent government service line, and we are happy to work with whatever it is that your community and your board feels is important to them in making the workings of this body intelligible and visible to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Any follow-up questions? Questions from the public? Question? Any hands up? And there are hands up? No? Okay, great. Questions from the public? Oh, Julie was surprised. Come on in.
Shocked.
Julie Kyle at the podium.
It's always concerning to us when we hear that you're backed by your JPA consists of public agencies. We're not a public agency. We're more of a private organization, and we're not funded by government. So how can you reassure us that our costs are going to stay in check?
I think, Sophia, I'm going to ask you to respond to that. I'm just going to say first that I have served as the administrator for this type of organization for many years, and I always recognized first and foremost that the folks that I was working with, those water producers, were basically paying my salary, and it was my job to keep their costs as low as possible and to always sharpen that pencil and make sure that they weren't paying more for anything that they needed to. That's my personal viewpoint, and I'll let Sophia respond for the organization.
Yeah, thank you. I think that public agencies actually are very mindful of money being spent and how it should or should not be conserved. I personally spent the first 15 years of my career in counties of California, which are over-mandated and underfunded historically, and I learned to squeeze every penny till it screamed, and I think that followed me into RGS, where the majority of our clients are not large public agencies. They are small public agencies, and they have limited budgets for administration and limited capacity to absorb any emergent costs. And so we are very careful that we are specific about priorities, about desired deliverables and that we don't exceed those boundaries. And if a new issue comes up, we examine it collectively to see if we understand where it fits. So we have a practice of paying attention to money because we know that we are billing our clients for the work that we do. We look at everything in terms of, can we make this more efficient? The Las Posas Valley Watermaster project Carol mentioned to you, we could have sent a PDF fillable form. It would have met the needs of collecting data in compliance with the judgment. I thought a survey would be more useful because it allows a data download and upload for the Fox Canyon GMA, who is managing the overall picture there. And rather than rekeying data, they can simply import a CSV file. So that's a small example, but it's one of the ways that our team thinks about everything that we do. Can we do this more efficiently? How can we save cost and steps? How can we use automation to benefit our clients rather than staff time to do things?
And I think just as a follow-up, as a public agency, we are not for profit. So there's no profit margin built into our rates. It's just to cover the cost of operating.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you for the answer. Any other follow-up questions? Okay. Oh,
sorry, I was listening to the
Mr. Calandri.
John,
I just want to introduce you, one of our charter board members for our Watermaster board. Pleasure to have you here, and whatever questions play.
It's a pleasure to be here. Sometimes I don't know if it's better to be in that seat or this seat. I listened all the way up from San Diego this morning, so I heard everything. But one thing that was puzzling me, my questions to the board, I noticed when we did the interviews years ago, there was prices given during this time. How come that wasn't done this time?
So I believe, and Pam, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Thank you. I also want to point out that we are a little bit over on our time, so hopefully this can be the last question.
Thank you.
This time around, it's a two-part process with a statement of qualifications request happening first. And then if the board chooses, a full RFP will go out, and that's when costs would be requested.
Understood. Thank you.
Good question, John. Thank you, Pam. Okay, anything else? I'm going to take direction from Pam, and we're going to end this. And thank you very much for being here today, and we look forward to following up with you in the future.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
And I'm going to take a 5-minute break while we get everything situated.
So the next step in this process is for the Watermaster Board to direct staff to provide a request for proposal, RFP, to either both, one, or neither of the interviewees that we heard today. If the board does choose to go forward with the RFP process, the second phase of that process would be review of those submitted RFPs, selection of applicants for second phase interviews, and then from that, one applicant may be selected to negotiate a refined scope and fee. So with that, I'll turn it back to the board for discussion.
Great, thank you. Further discussion? And we have this item on closed session too, right?
Yes.
So,
if needed.
So we don't need to come to any decision right now. This is just for any other comments or questions or anything, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Nope.
Yes, I did.
Okay, very good. That's for proposal for administrative services. Yeah.
Thanks again. So I'll just provide a little bit of background on this item, a summary of the RFP, and then go over some of the comments that we received from the advisory committee. So staff prepared a request for proposal for administrative services for the Watermaster with an anticipated scope of work that assumes a 2-year term with mutual options for extension, an estimated total fee, also with an estimated annual cost estimate for each year, and a transition cost breakdown is being requested in the RFP. And then there's a set of criteria that have been established from which the proposals will be evaluated. And just to kind of hit some of the key highlights of that, first would be a demonstrated understanding of the role of the Watermaster Administrator, the applicant's knowledge and understanding of the statement of work, a clear and effective transition plan with AVEC staff, and then the overall clarity of their proposal, and then, of course, reasonableness of their proposed fees. So if the board chooses, some of those RFP applicants could be invited for a public interview with the Watermaster. And those interviewees would be evaluated on both their proposal and how they do in the interview. And then any top ranked candidates could be invited to negotiate for a scope and fee. And then how that process will go is if an agreement is not reached within 5 working days, the next highest ranked candidate will be provided an opportunity to negotiate. And then that process would continue until an agreement is either reached or the board decides to re-advertise. And then we've kind of estimated a timeline for the RFP process. If the board approves, the RFP would be issued following the meeting today. There'd be a non-mandatory proposal conference on August 8th. Proposals due on August 14th. And then if we receive proposals, those would be presented to the board on September 25th. And the soonest the Watermaster could take board action on that item would be in October, at the October 23rd board meeting. So the advisory committee met on July 17th to discuss this item and provided 2 questions and also a suggestion. I'll go through all those, I'll also provide some staff comments and then turn it back to the board for discussion. So the first question the advisory committee asks is, should a transition period be better defined in the RFP? So the way it reads now, there's no hard deadline given for the transition yet by either the AVEC board or the Watermaster board. Some of the benefits of that is it allows greater flexibility for the proposers and then continued flexibility during the negotiations to ensure we have a strong transition process. Staff is recommending keeping the RFP as it reads. Our intention is to collaboratively develop a robust transition plan with a selected applicant. The second question that was asked is what level of in-person contact is needed between public board meetings? And staff also discussed this question and believes that just a single scheduled local office day per month would be sufficient given the current level of in-person appointments we've been experiencing. And then the third is just a suggestion in the language in the RFP section VC, selection of a Watermaster Administrator. And that's on, I think it's page 53 of your packet. The suggestion would be to delete the words on cost from the second sentence. And so it would now read, if an agreement is not reached within 5 working days, the next highest ranked proposing candidate will be contacted and negotiations with that candidate will begin. By removing on cost, we're just being more broad so that if an entire agreement is not reached, not just the cost portion of that. And so the committee does recommend using the draft RFP after the board has an opportunity to address these questions and comments.
Good question for you real quick, and maybe you guys can answer it. It seems like when we have our board meetings, about a half an hour before and about an hour after, you guys are getting asked questions from members of the public. I mean, I've seen it on more than a few occasions. Do we need to have that stated on there? Does that kind of just go with the in-person aspect, anticipation of them being here in person for the board meeting? I guess that's a discussion for the board and staff.
I think that's a good question. I haven't been participating long enough probably to answer that. Maybe Angel has some thoughts on that. She might have some feedback. I know, especially because she works with a lot of the applicants that might be coming to our meetings.
Yeah, Brandon, I do think the day of the board meeting, it's important to have a presence. There are a lot of public people that come to the board meeting with their questions. So yes, I do agree. And it's also nice to be available for individuals that want to come in at other times. I do agree with that. Even though we don't get many, it is nice to be available to the public at all times.
Well, like the gentleman discussed before, we do have a little bit of a unique aspect with some of the small pumpers that we have.
Yes.
We got to kind of be aware of that.
And like you said earlier, you mentioned that the elderly public. They're not very tech savvy, and they do need help. They need somebody in person to help them. And that could be a scheduled meeting the day of the board meeting if that's what we chose, but it is important to have public presence.
Well, and I'll just follow that up with a little kudos to all of you guys as well, because I've never seen you guys not take the time to help somebody, even if it was convenient or not convenient.
Right. Yeah, so always here to help.
That.
Well, I know that is like something that I think is very, very important. It's very hard to build trust remotely. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, that's why we have so many issues that we have that COVID cost, because so many things were done remotely. So definitely feel like we have to have someone's presence. And I know for just how involved, you know, the people are here, that they come to our meetings, you know, and they go to the advisory and they're very invested. And I don't know if you get that same kind of investment remotely.
Well, and I think that's what we need to be clear on the expectations.
Yes.
We need to, whoever it is, they need to make sure that our anticipation is they're here in half an hour before, ready to help, and at least an hour afterwards.
Yeah, and have that in there. So, you know, we want to make sure our expectations are really portrayed.
Okay, any other discussion?
That's it. Me.
Derek, do you have anything at this point?
Yeah, my only comment was, and I think staff said it was, you know, I like the flexibility, not forcing a transition time, but really, you know, seeing as part of their P is, you know, what that comes back to them from both of them. So I think it's a good question, but that's my feedback.
Great, thank you. There is public comment if you'd like.
John Clandry again. You notice when I walked in, I sat with Angel and Matt, and because of what I'm going to say, I had to move to the other side of the room. Nobody understands this job better than ABAC. Nobody can run this job smoother than ABAC. This has been my position for quite some time. Look what happened with the last administrator you hired. It was a disaster. We wanted somebody local. A lot of us wanted somebody local. Some of us didn't want somebody local. They're in touch with the community like nobody else. I still would urge that AVAC and the Watermaster could come to some kind of agreement with staffing up the AVAC board. That's all I got to say. That's still my heart. It's always been my heart. Still my heart. Thank you.
John, thank you for the nice comments. Okay, anything else from the public? Any hands up? Then we're on item 8A. So it's a proposed request for proposal for administrative services, and the action we need to take is to approve the request for proposal for administrative services. Is that correct?
Yes, and we've taken direction that we will be more specific with the in-person requirement, including a half hour before the board meeting and an hour after. That's the consensus.
Very good. So with that inclusion, is there a motion to approve the proposed request for the proposal for the administrative service?
I make that motion.
Motion made by Kathy, second by Brandon. Is there any discussion? Any public discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the proposed request for proposal for administrative services by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
And Director Paris?
Yes. Motion is carried unanimously. We're now on the consent agenda. Item A, financial report month ending June 30th, 2024. Is that you, Pam?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I just want to point out one comment that the advisory committee made. They did review the financial report for the month ending June 30th, the payment of bills through July 11th, and minutes of the last board meeting. And they did mention that the financial report was more appreciated. There's additional detail related to the replacement water assessments. So that's just something I wanted to point out in case the board would like to review that. And then also thank Teresa Yates for that. If you see her, she's been working on that.
Great.
And other than that, we don't have any other comments.
Okay, any questions regarding the financial report?
No, sir.
From the board, from the public? Seeing none, we're on item B, the payment of bills through July 11th, 2024.
Do you want to just do the consent agenda as a whole?
I will, after we go through
Okay, I'm sorry.
at each item. But always point that out. I don't mind. Yeah, no, I'll wrap it all up at the end. And payment of bills, any questions regarding the bill?
No question? No.
Anything from the public? Was there anything from the advisory committee?
No comments from the advisory.
Okay, great. And then if everybody will take a moment to review the agenda, that's on page 78, excuse me, the minutes of June 26, 2024. Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through C?
So moved.
Motion made by Brandon. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Carolina. Your first second.
There we go.
Is there any discussion? Anything from the public? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda items A through C by roll call vote?
Director McLaren.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Calandri.
Yes.
Director Urasic.
Yes.
And Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on the advisory committee report. Dennis, come on up.
Let's hear it, Dennis.
Do I get paid? Dennis Lamro with the advisory committee.
Kathy said you'll be paid.
We did
This month.
submit a report for the agenda packet, and I believe the report speaks for itself. I changed a word up there. So, any questions?
Any questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Now we're on the public hearing to consider the Antelope Valley Watermaster 2023 annual report. And we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Yeah.
So moved.
Motion made by Brandon to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second by Kathy to open the public hearing to consider the Antelope Valley Watermaster 2023 annual report. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote?
Director McLaren.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Calandri.
Yes.
Director Urasic.
Yes.
Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. And we will open the public hearing with the pod groundwater presentation. Arden, you there?
Thank you. Yes. I will share my screen. All right. All right. Can everyone see the presentation?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Do we have? You're a co-host.
Let me. Is it visible now?
I can see it, Arden.
Okay.
Can they see it in the boardroom?
No,
Not in the boardroom, so.
Let me try again.
Do we need to take our screen off?
They might have another copy of their presentation and not the live Zoom feed.
Yeah, I think it had.
I can see it. This is Derek.
So we can see it online.
Well, now I can't. It got kicked off, but.
Okay.
Close out our PowerPoint, I believe.
There we go. I see a slide that says final. Well, no, I see it moving. Okay. Final 2023 annual report. No, I don't.
I may have clicked a share multiple screens button. So let's try this one. Let's try this again.
We'll take a 1 minute break while we're waiting for this.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Arden, I can see the slides just fine. I think the problem might be in the boardroom. I can see you flipping through them now.
Okay, what about now?
We can see you, Arden.
There we go.
Okay, give us about 60 more seconds.
We can see it.
Want to get all our board numbers back. What was the issue on that for? Why any issue why it wasn't able to be shared, or did we figure it out?
Zoom had the setting share multiple screens. And so I think that for y'all's computer, it was still sharing the admin slides.
Understood. Well, now we have yours.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for your patience.
Problem solved, and we're just gonna wait for about 30 seconds for Brandon to return. 15 seconds. Brandon's here. Go ahead, Arden.
Excellent. Thank you all. So we're going to share an overview of the state of the basin, the big picture from the annual report, that very briefly, and some of the items in the report that we haven't had the opportunity to share in the board meetings over the last 2 months. In May, we had our first of our series of annual report presentations. And in May, we shared the overall effects of the historically wet year in 2023, showing precipitation as well as the total amount of recharge that of managed recharge that occurred in the basin and groundwater banking and the overall production. Last month, we shared about the change in water levels and our calculated change in storage from those water levels that is in the annual report, as well as subsidence over the past year and subsidence since the judgment began to be implemented. And this month, we're going to share a bit more about the total land use in the basin, as well as our carryover calculations that are in the annual report. We also are going to give an overview of the results in the draft model documentation appendix. So since we submitted our revised draft on July 2nd, we invited the public for comments, and we received minor comments from AVAC primarily. The changes that we made in regards to those comments are really adjusting some formatting, adjusting some typos, and mentioning the proximity of the Little Rock recharge project in the southeast sub area to Eastside Water Bank in a footnote. We've updated the production table as we've had more production reports come in, and particularly we've had an increase in reporting from new production parties, with much thanks to Angel for getting a lot of those parties to report. And the big item is that we have draft modeling documentation that is being finalized now and can be included with a draft on it in the appendix as Appendix O, with a note that the text in the main body describing the model updates will not change. And this is really the big question that we have for the board, is, once we share some of the information that this appendix includes, if the board feels that it's best to include this as a draft appendix to the annual report, or just post it to the website as a separate document, because we recognize that the board and the public have not had the opportunity to comment on it. And while it will be included, it can be included in draft form as the appendix, if the board feels that that's best. It also can serve as a standalone document available to the public. And we want to note that there is the opportunity for public comment today, and any recommendations for changes in the annual report, we invite the public to share and the board to discern if it's appropriate to include in the final report. Our goal is, this is due to the court and it's due to DWR by August 1st. We intend to post the final draft on the website by this Friday. So with that, a brief summary about the state of the basin. So y'all have heard this the last 2 months. 2023, we're in the 8th year of the final judgment. And this is significant because this is the first year since the end of the ramp down period. So all of the parties have production rights that are in line with the native safe yield value with a total of 82,300 acre feet per year. And the basin conditions over this past year show a pretty dramatic response to wet conditions. And with the wet conditions have come a high volume of imported water into the basin. There was a marked reduction in overall production because the parties that could use surface water are using surface water, and a total of 117,539 acre feet of imported water coming into the basin. And of that, 79,612 acre feet were stored water that was recharged in banking and recharge facilities. The model update is near completion, and we have the draft documentations for that provides the nitty-gritty details, as well as a new section in the annual report that includes details of the model update in broader terms. And we note that water levels throughout the basin over the last few years have either stabilized or the rates of decline have decreased when compared to the previous 25-year period. So this is our final update to our production numbers. We have had significantly more than 50% of the new production parties have reported, though there's still 51 who have not reported their production. And right now, our total production, excluding the recovery of stored water, is at 57,827 acre feet. If we include that stored water, it's at 64,861 acre feet. And we note that these numbers are lower than the native safe yield defined in the judgment. We'll also note that for the parties who are still delinquent with their annual production reports, even though we're submitting the annual report, we still really want you to submit your production reports. If we take the sum of the production rights or new production for these parties, the total is 3,831.6 acre feet. And when compared to the native safe yield, that's about 4.7% of that. So over 95% of, if we look at the production rights held by parties that are reporting, over 95% of that chunk of the production rights are reported. And we know that this year there has been an increase in new production party reporting. And I really want to give big kudos to Angel for making that happen. So this figure just shows where production is occurring in the basin, with the red and orange dots representing the wells. This is by well as opposed to by party. The wells that reported producing the highest volumes. We do note that there's quite a few locations where we have those little purple circles, and those are representing either wells where the parties have not reported or wells that in the past we've had documentation for, and for whatever reason, the party is no longer reporting for that well. And we've been working in our metering compliance work to sort of track down what's happening to these wells. And for many of these wells, they're inactive, and we've contacted the parties to let them know that the rules and regulations require evidence of wells being de-equipped. This figure shows the annual evapotranspiration data, and this is using the public resource OpenET. And we use this data to just look at how has land use changed over time, and how, for the model, are calculated recharge numbers changing over time for each year. And also in the annual report, we discuss how since 2016, we have seen a reduction in agricultural land use. And with that, there's been a reduction of calculated recharge into the basin from irrigation return flow. And then this figure is showing the distribution of carryover water at the end of 2023. And so there's sort of two takeaways that we can get from looking at which parties and wells have accrued carryover water and where are they located. The first one is, in some of these areas, we're seeing a bit of an increase in water levels, because these are areas where previously there were higher rates of production than we see now. It's also something to look out for. These are areas where parties have the right to increase their production a bit in the future if they want to use their carryover water. And so we do want to keep an eye on these areas. And these are areas where potentially we may see some transfers coming from if the parties choose to transfer their carryover water to another party or location. And that would require a material injury analysis. And then we've shared this figure before in our discussions of what to do at the 10-year mark for carryover water entering storage. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to. Can you go back one slide?
Yes.
When you look at that, Artie, in the annual report, the West Sub-Area Basin, I can tell you roughly off the top of my head, and Mrs. Kyle, give me a nod if you agree with this, there's probably been somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 acres of alfalfa eliminated from that area. There's probably been somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 acres of carrots eliminated from that area. In addition to that West Sudbury Basin, close to 800 acres of onion production has been eliminated. So you're talking somewhere north of, 40 to 50,000 acre feet of production that was occurring from 2000 to 2010 has been eliminated. So you're going to see substantial increases in the West Sudbury Basin like we have seen, but you're seeing your production continue to increase in the Central Sudbury Basin. And while we're here, I would just like for you to explain to me, when you're looking at the impact analysis of production or carryover transfers from the West Sudbury Basin to the Central Sudbury Basin, how do you factor that? Because even though we have an area that is increasing with its levels, what are we doing to make sure we take that into account through the analysis on transfers like carryover water rights?
So one item to look at is to think about how water levels are changing and the cumulative effects of water levels. And the hope is that for larger scale transfers, we now can utilize our model to look at long-term impacts of large transfers from one sub-area to another. We also are looking at the distribution of carryover water by sub-area from year to year, now as part of the annual report.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Director Yosik also has a question.
Derek, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe help me how you reference these carryovers by wells. I'll use, our firm as a perfect example. We have multiple wells. So how are you heat mapping this to those wells or a particular well versus just, the exhibit holder?
That's a great question. So it's an excellent point that there are parties that have wells in multiple sub-areas, on multiple properties, and they have the right to use their production right on their properties, on the parcels and wells that are listed, associated with their party. And that can vary from year to year. And so this isn't an exact map. The way that we assigned the volume of carryover water to each well, both to show it in the map and in our calculations of carryover by sub-area, is based on the historic use of water by each party. So for this, we looked at the distribution of how parties are currently using their water, or how they recently used it over the past year. So we looked at the reporting in the 2023 annual production reports. And for the parties that submitted the annual production reports, we then, for 2023, we split their carryover water based off of the percentage of use this past year that was at each well. So for example, if I had a well in the Central Antelope sub-area that produced 60 acre feet in 2023, and a well in the Southeast sub-area that produced 40 acre feet in 2023, I assigned 60% of the carryover water to that well in the Central Antelope sub-area and 40% in the Southeast sub-area. We recognize that this isn't perfect, but we do think that this is the best way to get a bird's eye view of how parties may use their water in the future, by looking at how they've historically used it, and recognize also that this has some flexibility.
Good. And just to follow up to that, I appreciate that comment and feedback. I would note that, you mentioned at the end flexibility and, making sure, I think Brandon brought up, is that, the material injury, with that flexibility is making sure we're addressing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about this slide or any of the previous slides before we move forward with the other ones?
No, looks good. Go ahead, Arden.
Thank you. So this is showing the distribution of carryover water over time by sub-area. So a few things that are worth pointing out. Like Director Calandri had noted, in yellow, we see the West Antelope sub-area volumes of carryover over time. And that's the sub-area that does show some pretty sizable increases proportionally, as well as the Central Antelope sub-area in green at the bottom, where we see increases over time. And though we also see those increases in the Southeast sub-area, and we note that in black at the top are parties that currently don't have a point of extraction listed for their carryover water. Many of these parties have noted that, or most of them have noted that they're using their water as an investment and understands that before they can use any carryover water, it will require either a new point of extraction or subsequent transfer application that requires a material injury analysis to be done. So that sums up the overall sort of three-part presentation of the main portions of the annual report and the year-to-year analyses that we do to keep track of the state of the basin and groundwater conditions. I'm now going to pivot to discussing the model update documentation in Appendix O. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we will, by Friday, have draft model documentation available to post on the website, and if the board would like, include in the annual report that will update to DWR's website. And we note that we're keeping draft on this because we recognize that the board and the public have not had the opportunity to comment on this. It's not required to include this documentation by DWR in the annual report, but the board may feel that it is useful to show the steps that are being taken to better understand the groundwater conditions in the basin. We have the summary in part 3 of the annual report, and we're not changing that text because it still stands. This is just more technical details of how the update was done, a more detailed methodology summary. And also this includes some of the results on change in storage from year to year, which I'll share in this presentation. We don't provide in-depth result interpretation. This is just kind of the cut and dry. These are what the results are showing. And I want to emphasize that we want comments from the public on this. And this can just be a standalone document that we invite the public, the board, the advisory committee to comment on. So one of the yes.
I'm sorry, do you want a response on that now or at the conclusion of the presentation?
I think it might be best at the conclusion of the presentation.
Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks. So one of the figures that are included in the model documentation summary is just showing where, now that we've expanded the grid from the previous USGS model covered a portion of the adjudicated basin, and now the grid covers the full adjudicated basin. And with that comes some changes to where our mountain front recharge is entering the basin. So on the left here, we're showing where the original USGS model had mountain front recharge entering the basin. And you'll note with the expansion of the model grid to the boundaries, in particular on the eastern and northeastern side of the basin, we have small amounts of recharge that are being modeled as entering the basin. We note that most of the recharge is still coming in on the southern and the western portions of the basin. And we also have adjusted the recharge to reflect the stream flow and have somewhat expanded the length to which some of the recharge is entering through streams in the basin. We also include a figure showing the distribution of urban and agricultural recharge. This change is due to just tracking the land use in the basin over recent years. And this is representing the 2016 through 2023 period of where urban and agricultural recharge is represented in the model. And we've shown this figure before of our calibration results. Essentially, this is looking on the x-axis, we have observed groundwater elevations. These are the water levels that are collected and reported to the Watermaster engineer, both from the USGS and also from agencies. And then on the y-axis, we have the modeled groundwater elevations. And so in the model, we have the inflows and outflows into the basin, areas of recharge, mountain front recharge, banking, and for outflows, almost all of it is from production. So including where production is occurring and how much is occurring in the basin. And this calibration is to see when we have those inflows and outflows and data into our model, is it able to represent what we're actually seeing on the ground? And aligning with that axis, our results suggest that yes, the model is able to accurately represent groundwater levels and match what we've observed over the recent years. And the big question in entering this period of updating the model was if the original USGS model was parameterized in a way that can accurately represent the current conditions and recent data. One of the big changes in recent years have been that we now have these large water banking operations. And this is sort of a new use and areas of stress in the basin that the original model may have not been developed to capture. However, when we included these data, the model was able to accurately represent these changes. And so we determined that we added our updates, we made some changes, but overall, the original assumptions that the USGS model had about the aquifer parameters, or essentially the way the hydraulic conductivity and conditions in which water flows through the aquifer, and the assumptions that are made both about the geology, but the characteristics of the aquifer hold up. And so we did not make large changes to this. And so here are the big results that I've been eager to see for months and months, and I'm sure plenty of y'all have as well, is what does the model show us as far as the annual change in water level volume? Or how has the total amount of water in storage in the basin changed since 2016? And so in this plot, we have in blue the modeled values of the total change in groundwater volume each year. And in green, we have the values that have been in our annual report using the surface difference method. And as a reminder, what we've been doing in the annual report was a method that was originally used in the adjudication process, where we take the contours of groundwater elevations in spring of the current year. We take the contours, the surface of the groundwater elevations in spring of the previous year, and we subtract the difference and multiply that by the storage properties of the aquifer in the areas that the water level has changed. We note that that method is from spring to spring, while the model is looking at changes in each annual year. So if we look at each year, a few things stick out. The first one is that the surface difference calculation method is a bit more dramatic in its highs and dramatic in its lows. We also note that this past year is dramatic for both methods because of the large amount of precipitation and natural recharge going into the basin, as well as banking. We also see some differences in sort of a delay that is seen in the effect from year to year in the modeled results shown in blue versus the surface different method shown in green. And that's really an effect of the spring to spring time step as opposed to looking at the calendar year. So overall, we see that the model is showing from 2016 to 2023, we have a net change of 120,629 acre feet in the basin. And much of this is due to the 2023 results because of this wet year. And we've had some very dry years from especially 2020 to 2022. The model is suggesting that the change in storage from the beginning of 2016 to the end of 2022 is 8,833 acre feet added to the basin. In contrast, the calculated spring 2016 to spring 2024 change using the surface difference calculation method is 244,241 acre feet. And most of that is coming from this past year. In fact, if we looked at what we had as our running change from spring 2016 to spring 2023, previously the change in storage was negative 53,940 acre feet. So reasons for the differences between these two numbers. The first one is keeping in mind that the model is looking at the beginning of 2016 until the end of 2023, while the calculated surface water difference method is looking at spring 2016 until spring 2024. So it's including all of the recharge from precipitation and managed recharge efforts during spring 2024. And we did have a hydrologically wet year this year. We also note that there could be a lag time for the model to fully capture effects of the 2023 wet year. That includes mountain front recharge from precipitation that may have occurred late in 2023. As we discussed last month in the annual report, our method of calculating the change in groundwater volume from looking at the spring to spring water levels is a little bit skewed because many of our monitoring wells are located near recharge projects and well fields. And this overemphasizes banking and municipal pumping effects. And it's noted that when this process was originally utilized during the adjudication, there was not the scale of recharge that we have now. So we did expect that the numbers, especially from this past year, overinflated the amount of recharge in the basin, just looking at the water levels. And during the dry years, it overemphasized declines in water levels because it was looking at the locations where the most groundwater was being extracted and where you have the most dramatic shifts from year to year. And then finally, the surface difference calculation method has quite a few data gaps, in particular near basin boundaries. While the model, we still do have data gaps that make it difficult for us to really know how accurate the calibration is in those areas, but we are able to reflect mountain front recharge and have a better sense of what's going on in that area, as opposed to just data gaps in those regions and interpolating out to them. So I want to put this change in storage in context. First, I want to note that the model is an important tool that we can use to understand the change in groundwater volume, and that we're still reporting change in storage to DWR using our change in water level method, because we've done that the last few years, and We didn't get these numbers until the week before we're submitting it. And I want to emphasize that this is a net positive water balance since the judgment was net positive does include stored water. This corresponds to what we observed with increasing water levels and decreased rates of decline in the basin. And it's pretty significant that we're at the end of our ramp down period. We've had 1 year where the water rights are distributed, are equal to the native safe yield. Only 1 year. And we've also had historic droughts. So it's exciting to have both the model and the storage, the water level calculation method suggests that there's a positive change. I do want to put this into context, though, that there are storage and carryover obligations that exist. The annual report notes that there are almost 200,000 acre feet of stored water available for recovery, as well as 224,247 acre feet of carryover that's available for use. So that is what I have to share regarding the annual report update, as well as a brief overview of the model documentation. Our schedule is on Friday to post the final annual report and work with council to submit the annual report to the court and submit the annual report to DWR to be in SGMA compliance prior to August 1st. So thank you, and I'd like to invite any questions from the public or the board.
Okay, any questions from the board? Derek? Any questions?
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions from the public? Okay, excellent report, Arden. And that concludes our public hearing. So I need a motion to end the public hearing.
Motion.
Made by Kathy. Is there a second?
Second.
By Brandon. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to end the public hearing by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urosic?
Yes.
And Director Paris?
Yes. Public hearing is closed. We're back in open session. We're on item 12, consideration possible action to approve the Antelope Valley Watermaster's 2023 annual report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made Kathy, second by Brandon, that including that the report will be filed with the court and Department of Water Resources reporting system in compliance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Okay, motion made and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urosic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item presentation 2024 second quarter year-to-date budget review. Pam?
Thank you, Chair Paris. On page 91 of your packet, you'll find a staff report for this item. Just a quick overview of the presentation. We'll look at the budget versus actual report, review that, and as well as a variance analysis for that report. Then followed by a cash flow analysis. Just look at our conclusions and what comes next, and then open it up if the board has any questions. So staff prepared a budget versus actual report for the quarter that's ending June 30th, 2024. During this period, the Watermaster has accrued $978,541 in total revenue. We're tracking with a very favorable variance at 90% of the estimated budget that's been collected. The total expenses that were accrued during this period have been $425,017. Also tracking with a very favorable variance at only 41% of the estimated budget, even though we're halfway through the year. Staff also prepared a year-to-date cash flow analysis through July 10th, 2024. And then what this does is tracks the inflow and outflow of cash for a given period. And the total revenue that's been collected for this period is $950,085. That's 97% of the actual total revenue that's been reported has actually been collected. Just a note, delinquent invoices will be produced the first week in August, so we'll see some additional revenue there. $352,927 in total expenses have been paid, and there will be an additional $72,090 paid following approval from the board at this meeting, and that together will be 100% of all current expenses to date. Currently, the Watermaster is operating with a positive cash flow with a net inflow of $525,068. So Watermaster continues to be in good financial health and is operating efficiently from what we can see from our reports. A budget or cash flow shortfall is not forecasted through the end of the calendar year. The cash that's been acquired is exceeding the cash spent for this reporting period. And then staff is going to continue to monitor revenue and expenses, and we'll report again in Q3.
Great. Very good report. Any question? I have one, and I'm not sure if this is a Teresa question, but on the expenses under administrative services, the budget was $229,832, and is it correct year to date only $63,510 has been billed?
Yes, that's correct. So
is there a reason for that, or?
I think we're just again having ABEC meetings.
It's like a setup.
I know what it is.
You're going to ask that question. And then what was the administrator services additional considerations of the $57,387?
That's something that I believe Hallmark had included. This is from Hallmark's budget. I'm not sure what that was for. Patty or Angel, do you recall? That's something that they had included in their previous budget, and that's what we're using for the static budget.
Okay.
I think that's probably, additional resources they might have anticipated needing potentially.
Or Julie's favorite word.
I'm sorry?
Change order.
It could be Julie's favorite word.
Rob, I believe those were just additional tasks they were optional to the Watermaster when Hallmark.
Yeah,
yes.
I recall it.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? And there's no action item on item 13, right? Item 14, consideration possible action to review paid May 2024 new production invoices. And is that going to be Angel?
Yeah.
Angel, shall go.
Okay, thank you. Cam, can you move our next slide, please? So the board knows staff invoiced new producers that failed to submit their 2023 annual production reports for their actual approved new production amount. That was per the amended rules and regulations. Since then, we have been working with the new producers to collect past due production reports to get their actual production and either adjust that invoice, give possible refunds, and also collect additional assessments due based on those actual production amounts. If you look on page 95 of your agenda packet, you'll see a list. Pam, can you advance the slide? So there you go. It's also on the screen. These are the new producers that I have been working with this past month. As you can see, I've also contacted new producers that have paid their invoice, as I was not doing before, but that was a recommendation by the board last month. You can see the list here. There's one that does stand out and I have had questions on. So La Casepa Church, they're approved new producer. They were approved in 2018. They successfully intervened in the judgment because they had an existing well. It's really hard to collect their production reports because there's staff changes and everybody's a volunteer. But I was able to reach out, spoke with the gentleman, and working together, we were able to get a meter read from 2021 and a meter read from 2024. The time between those meter reads equaled 3 years. So we estimated this production based off those meter reads, and we took the total amount and just divided it by 3. So that's why it's 14 acre foot per year. So they were originally invoiced the $8,106. Their new adjusted invoiced amount will be $25,214. And I just want to let the board know that the delinquent replacement water assessments for this invoice were invoiced at the current year replacement water rate. If you have any questions on the others, I'd be happy to answer them, but the staff does recommend that the board consider adjusting the following invoices.
On the Wacosepa, how did we originally get the $8,106?
That was based off of their approved new production amount. So they were approved to pump 14.16 acre feet of water per year.
And was that then only for 1 year?
Yes, that is correct.
And had they been billed in the prior years?
Yes, and they've always paid their invoices. And just to give you an idea of their past production, 2017, they reported 16.5. 2018, it was 27.4. 19 was 28.3, and 2020 was 29.2. And they've always paid their replacement water assessments and administrative assessments for their production. And like I said, these 3 years are based off of 3 years meter read, and we just divided it by 3.
I understand that, but so they're 3 years behind right now?
That is correct. They submitted their 2021, 22, and 23 annual production reports to the Watermaster.
Okay.
When did they intervene?
They intervened in 2018. They also were required to submit their 2017 production report because they were found pumping, I guess, outside of the judgment. So they did pay 2017 before actually intervening and being approved by the Watermaster for their new production.
Okay. And are they aware of the new invoice now?
I have let them know, and we will send that invoice out once approved today.
Where are they located at? Are they on 170?
Yeah, they're out in
the Dr. Nichols branch.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? And Angel, what action are you requesting that we approve?
Yeah, I'm requesting that the board consider adjusting the following invoices listed on page 95 of the board agenda.
Can we get an input from Mr. Parton on that?
Yes. Craig?
Agree that it ought to be approved.
Okay.
Wacosepa has been a good actor. They're falling short in terms of producing production reports, but they were an early intervener. I think it's a fair amendment to their invoice.
But Angel's not just asking for the church out there, she's asking for everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
Okay,
right.
so you're good with
yes, yes.
Okay.
Can I get clarification though? I heard something about a reimbursement to others. Can
yeah, so if you look on the second column, you'll see the invoices have been paid. At last board meeting, at the board's request, I have reached out to new producers that have paid their invoices to give them the equal opportunity to submit production reports. And so if they did pay and their actual production was less than what they paid, their invoice will be adjusted and we will give refunds for the difference.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I will move to approve these.
Wait 1 second. Yeah. Okay, so the motion is to approve the new invoice amounts
Yes.
on the July 11, 2024 memorandum that we have on page 95.
I would like to make a clarification point, if I can.
Yes, go ahead, Brent.
We're not approving a reduction. We're fixing the invoice to match what should have been billed. So nobody's getting a price break.
That is correct.
It's an adjusted invoice to match what should have been paid to the Watermaster originally.
So
Have they submitted their
adjustment?
They approve the adjustment.
Yeah. Okay. So the actual motion is to approve the May 2024 new production invoices that are listed in the memorandum on page 95.
And adjusted.
And adjusted.
Nobody's getting a price break. They're paying what is owed.
Understood. Is there a second to Kathy's motion?
Second.
Second by Brandon. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
Director Harris.
Yes. Motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 15, consideration possible action on the transfer applications, and that's going to be the Arden Show. Arden?
Thank you.
Sorry, Arden, I need to interrupt. Craig, I know the answer to it, but I have to have the discussion. I am a board member for the Antelope Valley Fairgrounds, and they're about to go into discussion for the 50th AA district. I do not sit on the 50th district, but I do sit on one of the fair boards.
I understand. I don't believe you have a conflict that requires you to not participate in this. You're
Out of an abundance of caution, Angela and Alec, are you on the phone?
Brandon, I would appreciate if you not do that.
Okay.
Because I sit on the JPA board of the fair. I will follow Craig's advice not to recuse myself.
Okay.
And I also sit for transparency on the Antelope Valley Fair Association board. Not the 50th, but the Antelope Valley Fair.
All right, Craig, you're good with me staying on.
Absolutely. It's pursuant to a memo on the subject that we did a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And made clear that you have a fiduciary duty to the Watermaster board. And that's critical above all things in this situation. And you have absolute right and I think responsibility to participate in what you already have as a fiduciary duty.
Okay, I just want to have the discussion and transparency and all.
Thank you, Brandon. Oh, and there's one thing on the annual report, and we did not go back and discuss it, Arden. So while you're on, is it okay that we go back to discuss the model?
On the model results, absolutely.
Yeah, because you were asking us the question of should the model results be included in the annual report or not? And I think Craig had a comment on that for you.
Arden, did you intend to submit the model results along with the production of the annual report? It was unclear to me whether that was going to be submitted as a draft or was subject to further input from the board.
Sorry, I was on mute. The question that we have is, so we do intend in the model technical documentation to provide a brief summary of the results of change in storage each year from the model. That would be, if included in the annual report, part of the draft technical model technical documentation in Appendix O. So our question is, do we want to not include the appendix because it is in draft form and has not had the opportunity for the board or public to review, and instead have it as a standalone document or include it in draft form as an appendix?
And that was my concern, that it's in draft form right now, and we don't have a duty to include it. if we're better, and we've not had input from the board or the public, whether we're better advised to hold on that at this point. My question to the board, whether it makes more sense to hold the model results for now until there's further public input and board input.
Comments from the board?
I appreciate it again, Carolina Hernandez. I did catch that this was a question from Aaron, and I do feel that it's appropriate only to include the final report and not the draft at this time. So, as mentioned by council, I think it's advisable that we allow for time for the board to review as well as hear from the public.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the head shaking here. That is a consensus of the board. Arden, Derek, did you have a comment on that?
No, agree, and good comments.
The advisory board got to see it, correct? Oh, yes.
Right. Yeah. So, Arden, the direction, we're obviously following the direction of the attorney that direction is given not to include the draft model report with the report that's gone out on an annual report. Okay?
Okay, happy to do that. And I think what would be appropriate in references to remove in the text references to the appendix and state that we'll aim to get the technical documentation posted to the website prior to the submittal of the annual report, and we'll just have a note that a draft is posted to the website for public review.
That will be fine.
As long as we have it posted by July 31st, I think we're fine.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, Arden, just work with Craig to make sure that gets done correctly, if you will, please.
Yes, will do. Thank y'all for circling back.
Yeah, I had forgotten and remembered when your voice came on again. Okay, now it looks like you're on item A of agenda item 15.
Thank you. So this is a transfer from 50th District Agricultural Association to City of Lancaster for 32 acre-feet per year of permanent production rights. This was presented last month and held pending questions. And I do want to invite Craig if he has any additional comments or statements to make in regards to the questions that were raised last month.
Yes, we had a memo on this subject last month, and the conclusion was, the legal conclusion was that this transfer was appropriate. It could be made. It did not violate the judgment to be made. But how did we want to track the usage, and what consent, if any, did the parties, the Agricultural Association number 50, and the City of Lancaster need to get from the other state of California parties to make them aware that there's a transfer going on? So we looked at the question. We submitted a memo for the board's review that's on page 100 and 101. And our recommendation is, and it should be clear, this isn't an opposition to the transfer. I think we all agree the transfer is appropriate. The question is, what consent would it be wise for the board to have that the state of California parties recognize that a permanent transfer of their rights in the City of Lancaster is occurring? We think that there needs to be some recognition that that's happening for the board's own protection. So the memo recommends that. It would recommend you approve the resolution subject to getting the consent, whether that's of one player representing the state of California agencies. We hopefully that is the case, that getting consent isn't a 10-year process for the City of Lancaster.
In the memorandum you've attached to your memo, it seems to indicate that the Attorney General's office represented the state of California in the adjudication report.
And that's what we want to confirm, that there's a representative of the state of California for purposes of this litigation. And if their consent is secured, I think the board is safe to approve the transfer.
Okay.
So, Mr.
Caroline.
Yeah, I do note that on page 101, that Craig, that council suggesting that all other state of California agencies listed on paragraph 5.1.5.2 of the consent decree be the ones that are approached or have authorities to approve this. Now, what I'm hearing from you is that perhaps our board could have a conditional approval, either that those listed in that paragraph provide consent or the Attorney General. Is that the case? Or?
What needs to happen is consent obtained that is broad enough to protect the board, that the transfer was done with the knowledge of the state of California parties. I believe the Attorney General appeared on behalf of the state of California parties in the litigation and would have the authority to bind them by consenting to the transfer. I think one concern that's been mentioned is that if the city of Lancaster is to get the individual consent of every party in the judgment, it would take from now to the second judgment to be to occur, to get those actual consents. So I'm saying if you can approve the transfer subject to the condition that appropriate legally binding consent is obtained, then you agree that the transfer can go forward.
And I discussed this with Craig, Carolina before. We've been having continuous problem with the state of California getting them to give us any reports. Some of them do, some of them don't. I think only a few of them do. So we need to get a hold of the Attorney General's office, see who's handling this for the Attorney General, and start getting them to work with the state agencies to get compliance, since they are the attorney of record for all those state agencies. So it's good timing that this has come up, and I think the Watermaster administrators can take the labor and oar tracking down who now is responsible in the Attorney General's office for this, and then assist the city of Lancaster and the Fair District with getting this requirement done. And then having somebody we can send letters to pay their assessments and to do their reports.
So I would approve that.
Wait, let's wait. I think Patty had a comment. No, we're good.
I was going to approve the motion how Craig just said it, so that it would be, if you have that down.
The subject to getting consent from the state?
Appropriate legal binding.
I would say we're looking, if I may make the official motion, motion to approve R24-30, subject to the conditions set forth by our attorney with obtaining all approvals necessary from the individual agencies.
I would not do it that way.
Why not?
Because we want it from one agency, because if you try to get this from every one of those agencies involved, they're going to send it to different counsel, maybe, and it's going to be, it will never happen. And that's the problem we're having right now with getting them to pay their administrative assessments, getting them to do their proper reports. So it should be what Craig told us, the binding legal authority for the state of California. And then once we discover who that is, we know who to send all our nasty letters to pay up and to report their water usage.
Right.
Well, not nasty letters, nice, I'm sorry, Julie, nice letters like that. All right.
These agencies, all of these state agencies, are they not current?
No, they're not. Some of them are. I think
Are they not handled as a whole because they're carved out separately in the judgment in my mind that
they, from my understanding, and Joel or whoever's doing
They're
this,
separate agencies.
yeah. So some of them, like the fair's been reporting, I think DWR may have been reporting, but we're not getting consistent reports on this amount of water or assessment fees paid. So since this has come up, I just think now's the time for us to dig into it and work with the Attorney General's office to see who is it, the same attorney from the Attorney General's office or a new one, but we need to get that fixed anyway.
All right, so amend the motion.
You don't need to amend it. You haven't made it yet. I haven't accepted it.
All right, approve R24-30 while adapting our attorney's recommendations to obtain approval from the proper agency.
Proper binding legal authority for the
proper binding legal authority.
And Craig will amend the resolution pursuant to what your motion is.
Yeah, I'm thinking, as I'm thinking about this, I would rather amend it clearly and represent it to the board next month rather than try and do this on the fly. And I can, by the way, we also give a month to find out if there is a single representative that can give consent on behalf of all of the parties.
Yeah. And Pam, is that something staff can work on with the Attorney General's office? I would think the best way to start is look who the attorney of record was for the state of California on this, and it looks like it.
And on page 1.
Well, she was the Attorney General. I think she's a little busy now to call. But what this says, it looks like from the memorandum that, if I can read how they do this right, Noah Golden Krasner with state bar number 217556 was probably the one who wrote this original memorandum the declaration to Jack Comar. So and there's phone numbers, and I think we start there and then work with Craig to insert the language necessary to make this happen.
I would continue it to next month.
Yeah.
By the way, I have contact with that lawyer on behalf of the state that you just mentioned in another case. So I think it makes sense to put it over 1 month, possibly have the name of the entity that will do that, and we can make the condition clear of what Lancaster and the state of California are to do to perfect this transfer.
Okay. And Dennis, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. Dennis Lamoureux with the advisory committee. One, the advisory committee was told the state was current on all their reporting and payments. That we asked that last month. So that shouldn't be an issue. The second is my comment individually. As I understand what you're talking about, you're asking the administrative staff to take on the responsibility of completing an application for a transfer. Typically, the parties are responsible for fulfilling those, making sure it's a complete application. And so I'd be cautious about setting a precedent for future applications that the staff here is going to complete them.
No, I think very good comment, Dennis. My direction is more, and who's getting the assessment? So Angel,
I can help clarify that.
Yeah, is the state, all the state agencies up to date on their assessment?
Okay. Just for clarification, out of the state parties, the only state parties that we've received anything from is the 50 Ag District, the Veterans, I believe, and the Park and Recs. Other than that, we have had no communication with the others. I think what Dennis is referring to is the 50th Ag District is current with all assessments, all reporting. They are the only state agency that is.
So that, and what I'm requesting is not we do anything for their application, but this is a problem we need to fix anyway. And the only person who can fix it for the state, or the only agency, is the attorney generals who represented them at the beginning.
Right. The attorney general could fix the reporting and payment part. I think the point is that the applicant here is the 50th district, and it should be on their shoulders to get the appropriate approvals from the state of California rather than the staff that we all pay for.
No, I understand that, and that's what will happen, but the way Craig's memo was worded was what I thought the issue was. These agencies aren't reporting anything now. Some of them don't even know they have water. Many of them wouldn't know where to even send the request to for approval. The approval should come from the legal authority for the state of California for all of them. So the only thing that we had discussed is don't make the 50th agricultural district track down 6 or 7 agencies when we need the binding agreement by the attorney general's office.
Well, again, I would think that that's in their court to bring back here for this board to consider rather than our staff to do that. That's my point.
And my direction, staff, is it will be in their court, but what's in our court is to fix the problem we've had for several years with the state, to get a hold of them, find out who that authority is, so that that's where we would be sending the letters in the future to, or them telling us where we send those letters in the future to.
And my goal is to clarify and simplify the resolution for next month and have who is the consent from, not to do a lot of legwork that Lancaster or the 50th district ought to do. So I appreciate the comments. I am very focused on what I think the board needs to consider next month.
Great. Okay, so is there a motion to table R2430 until our next meeting? So moved. Motion made by Brandon, second by Kathy. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to table R2430 by roll call vote.
Hey, Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Colandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes. That brings us to R2436. Arden?
Thank you. So this is for a one-time transfer of 150 acre feet from Steve and Denise Godey to Robertson's Ready Mix. Steve and Denise Godey have a parcel in the central Antelope sub-area. This is the same beginning and end of the transfer that was approved last month from Pamela Godey to Robertson's Ready Mix. Robertson's Ready Mix has wells in the southeast sub-area, and their parcels are not far from Little Rock Creek. So we conducted a material injury analysis. It's the same analysis for both this transfer and last month's transfer from Pamela Godey to Robertson's, looking at water levels, especially in the vicinity of Robertson's Ready Mix. And we noted that the hydrographs show a pronounced increase in water levels near the Robertson's parcels in the southeast sub-area. And that's a response to both the recharge through Little Rock Creek, both native recharge this past year and managed recharge through the Little Rock Creek recharge project. So we determined that the potential for material injury is negligible, and this was unanimously recommended by the advisory committee. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve resolution R2436?
So moved.
Motion made by Kathy.
Second.
Second by Brandon. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution R2426 by roll call vote?
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on item 16, consideration possible action on new production applications, R2437, and that's going to be Arden.
Thank you. This application is a new production application requesting 0.5 acre feet per year of new production by Matt and Vanessa Bell. They intend to build a single family home with a private workshop. And they noted that all of their landscaping are rocks and desert plants. And we note that Matt Bell has had a past new production application approved, and he's in compliance with all metering and reporting. So he has a meter installed, it's properly documented by an approved installer, and he's been reporting his annual and quarterly production to the Watermaster. So given the small amount and obligation to pay a replacement water assessment, Todd Groundwater finds the potential for a material injury to be negligible. And this was unanimously recommended by the advisory committee.
Any questions from anyone?
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve Resolution R2437. Caroline?
Second.
Second by Carolina. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve R2437 by roll call vote?
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion is carried unanimously. We're now on item 17, consideration possible action on new point of extraction application by the City of Lancaster, R2438.
Thank you. So this is looking at a new point of extraction for City of Lancaster to use the 50 acre feet per year that they received a couple of months ago from LA County Sanitation District. So this is not in regards to the 32 acre feet that is still in consideration, but this is for the 50 acre foot per year of Exhibit 4 right. So they'd like to use this at their soccer complex, where the judgment currently gives them the right to produce up to 500 acre feet per year. And so this would allow them to produce up to 550 acre feet per year from this well. So for a material injury analysis, we did three things. We looked at their past production, and then we looked at water levels, including water levels that were monitored from their well on this parcel. And we also looked at historic subsidence in this area. And so we note that in 2016 and 2017, they produced 568 and 584 acre feet each year, respectively, from this well. Both volumes are greater than the proposed 550 acre feet per year. And then they've decreased their production to about 430 acre feet per year in 2022 and this past year in 2023. So for our material injury analysis, looking at the groundwater levels, we got their permission to include the hydrographs from the monitoring data that they've submitted in this application for the public to see. And we see that water levels at their wells have increased since 2016. And this is likely a response to that decrease in production. And then nearby monitoring wells show either slightly stable or slightly increasing water levels to the north and east. So we see water levels increasing as a response to a decrease in production at their parcel. But in the vicinity, water levels, for the most part, are pretty stable. There are some water levels slightly to the south that are slightly declining, but the closest water levels to the Lancaster parcels are stable or slightly increasing. We also note that there are several large pumpers in the area, and the City of Lancaster production does not appear to be a large influence on the surrounding wells. So we included a map showing this parcel and the proximity to subsidence from 2016 to 2023. And so this is in an area where there's been between 0.1 and 0.2 feet of subsidence observed since 2015, which does suggest that the parcel is underlain by some clay-rich sediments. However, this isn't the area that is seeing the most subsidence in the central Antelope subarea. And we also note that subsidence is most at risk when the water level is below the historical minimum. Because the surrounding water levels are stable and past production has been greater than 550 acre-feet per year, it's not expected that producing 550 acre-feet per year would cause water levels to go below the historical minimum. So we don't expect that 550 acre-feet per year would cause material injury. And provided that City of Lancaster produces less than their historical max production, which we have records of 584 acre-feet per year, and that they have continued water level monitoring, we find the risk of material injury to be negligible. And then this was unanimously recommended for approval by the advisory committee. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Arden. Any questions of Arden?
No questions.
Arden, just a couple quick comments. The original water rights that they have that they're proposing to use at this site is still in the central sub-area basin. So it's the same basin to the same basin, correct?
That's correct, yes.
If I'm right, they got their water rights from about 7 miles north of their current location. And then you said they're limited to 550 acre-feet per that well. I read the judgment. I don't recall seeing it specific to that well. I thought it was to that site.
That's correct, yes. That is an important correction.
So them acquiring Exhibit 4 water and moving it over there, I see no problem with it. I would make the motion to approve it.
Motion made by Brandon to approve Resolution R2438. Carolina?
Second.
Motion second by Carolina. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion is carried unanimously. Item 18, consideration possible action to add Todd Groundwater's Task 6 metering application to the scope of work. And Arden, if you want to give us a quick summary, since the advisory committee voted 11-0 to approve this, and that was the only hang up last time.
Well, they had asked for additional information, and from my understanding, now that they hear it, despite it being technological, they see good points.
Great, go ahead, Arden.
Thank you. I don't have much to add. We shared last month sort of our cost benefit analysis and believe that not only will this application allow us to better represent production throughout the year by each party reporting in the basin and make our understanding of basin conditions more accurate, we also believe that it will reduce the time required to organize and review the monthly and quarterly production reports. And we also hope that this can be a tool to help the admin more easily organize and utilize the data that they receive from parties.
Thank you, Arden. Is there a motion to approve the additional amount of $28,910 for the metering application for Task 6 for the floor? Motion made by Kathy. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Carolina. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. Now an administrator's report. Go as fast as you can, Pam.
I will.
Everything's good.
I'll start out just to save time already. Looking out from July through September, I'll just touch on the items that weren't already covered in the packet. And that's that in July, we also initiated landowner elections. Those ballots are due on August 9th. We also sent reminder letters out for the variable and replacement water invoices that have not yet been paid. In August, we'll be preparing and mailing delinquent invoices for unpaid replacement water and variable assessments, and then also announcing election results and filing of a declaration. September, new board members will take their seats, and then any unpaid delinquent assessments that are listed will be accepted and filed. We do have a recommendation to add a line item to the transfer request form, and that would be to specify the year of carryover water that's being transferred. And then there'd be two options. One would be to list it on a first in, first out basis, or specify the year specifically of the carryover water.
And would that be put on next month's agenda for approval, or do you need that, or what are you requesting?
I think we're just recommending that it be done. If it's something we want to add as an agenda item next month, we could certainly bring it back.
So you're asking that the applicant is going to fill that out?
Yeah, that the transfer request form would have those two options added, and that would be filled out by the applicant.
Doesn't the judgment state it's first in, first out?
I was going to comment on whether we need to have approval of this at a board meeting. And I think we do.
Yeah, I do. Just put it on the next agenda and let's move on to the next.
Sounds good. We'll bring that back.
Thanks.
And then just to update you on landowner nominees and ballots, we did receive one nomination for the landowner representative position. That's a 4-year term. 2 nominations for the landowner alternate position. That's a 2-year term. Ballots and statement of qualifications for the candidates were sent out on July 12th. And then those ballots are due back no later than 5 o'clock on August 9th. Staff will be coordinating with the Inspector of Elections to tally the votes on August 12th.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Arden Watermaster Engineers report, and as quickly as you possibly can, please.
Alrighty. We have really shared everything that we intended to share. All I have is our very briefly summary of new production and qualified small pumpers. We are at 1,040.82 acre feet per year of approved new production after 1.5 acre feet approved last meeting. And last few years, no changes in small pumpers. That's all I have to share.
Great. Thank you very much. Great report, Arden.
Thank you.
We're now in General Counsel's report.
Mine is greater and shorter. It's all covered in closed session.
Okay. Board members' requests for future items. Other than that one request, I think we're good. And we will take a quick break and we will adjourn to closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session? Motion is by Carolina.
So moved.
There you go. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Brandon. You got your first motion now too.
Oh.
Motion made in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor of the motion to go into closed session by roll call vote?
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. Can somebody, I think the lunch for the development committee is going to be coming in shortly. If somebody can ask Diana, just have them set it up out here and we should be up. Or can we do our closed session in the little room, or would that be burdensome for you? Oh, everybody. Yeah, never mind. Yeah, okay. Let's just do that. Set the lunch out here for the development committee and we'll be working through it.